We ready to go? Okay. Well, welcome everyone. This is the February 8th, is that right? 2023 League of Women Voters Speakers Forum. And before we get started, before I introduce our speaker, I want to announce that we are still working out details to try to secure the panel for March 1st. So stay tuned for that. It'll be if we are successful in securing all of those panelists, we'll certainly get that out in our newspaper press releases and then also on the League of Women Voters website. So keep an eye out for those things. We will have another meeting on March 8th. It will not be recorded, but it's going to be, let me see what the name of that is again here. I'll let you know. Hang on. It's going to be on the nuances of the nuance surrounding pregnancy and abortion, and that'll be moderated by Connie Brum. So I think that'll generate quite a lot of interest as well. So keep an eye out for announcements concerning that speakers forum. We are in the throes of recruiting new members for our poverty study update. Some of you know that we conducted a study in 2012 and published that report. And it's past time for us to work on an update for that. So many things have changed since our 2012 report. And we have this mini but mighty crew working on chapters for that expanded document. And we would love to recruit new members. I think you'll find the work meaningful. There are real results that came from our 2012 report. I'm quite sure that Moscow would not have a federally qualified health center, the Chaz facility, at least not when it got that, were it not for the League's report. I think Family Promise of the Palouse was something that was really sparked and encouraged by that, along with the city's Poverty on the Palouse series of meetings. So you can make a meaningful difference, a lasting difference in this community for the people who live here and who attend school, who visit here, all of that. If you'd like to come and participate in our poverty meeting, that next one is going to be February 16th from 12 till 1:30 in the Fisk room. It's not a general presentation kind of a meeting, it's a working meeting. So if you think you might be interested, we encourage you to come. And if you have questions about it, you can certainly contact me or others involved with League leadership through our website. Are there any other announcements this afternoon before we get started? Okay. Hearing none then, let me introduce today's topic. It's on the new 988 Crisis and Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which was just implemented in July of 2022. Our speaker this afternoon is Steve Button, who is a board member representing the Suicide Prevention of the Inland Northwest, or SPIN. Steve has joined us today to talk about the ways the new 988 Lifeline can be used by anyone, how to access it, and I'm hoping people can hear me. I didn't even think to turn on our microphone here. Let's try that. So again, the 988 Crisis Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and it can be used by anyone. Steve will talk about how to access that, what callers can expect, and what they do. He will also talk about how suicide is affecting our region in North Central Idaho and what we can do to help those who might be contemplating suicide. Steve has a master's degree in social work from the University of Washington. I just learned this afternoon that he is also an alumnus of the University of Idaho, having earned his bachelor's degree here, and worked as adjunct faculty with the psychology department. Steve has served as a social worker for 29 years in the Lewiston School District prior to his retirement in 2018. He served in a number of volunteer positions over the years. He was a hospice volunteer for 20 years. He's founder of the Willow Center for Grieving Children and has continued to serve as a volunteer there for 25 years. Steve has been associated with regional nonprofits involved with suicide prevention since 2003 and currently serves on the Board for Suicide Prevention of the Inland Northwest, also known as SPIN. In addition, Steve is an active board member, probably avid too, for the Kiwanis Club.
Rabid, avid.
That's right, those Kiwanians, the Kiwanis Club of the LC Valley, and also serves on the board of directors for St. Joseph Regional Medical Center. So please join me in welcoming today's speaker, Steve Button.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for asking me to come up on this bright and mostly sunny February afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity to give you a little bit of information. I'm really not an expert. I'm just somebody that's pretty passionate about this topic and have had some involvement with our local group as well as with the state group in the past around suicide prevention. And so wanted to just come up here and share with you a little bit. You probably know, some of you know as much as I do about the new 988 number, but gonna give you some information about that. Gonna give you a little bit of information about our organization, SPIN, as well as some of the things that we do. We'll talk about an activity we actually have going on tonight, and we'll maybe hopefully get it up in the Moscow or somewhere on the Palouse in the not too far distant future that we've been pretty excited about, as well as some of the other things that we're doing. And then kind of toward the end, I want to talk a little bit more specifically about how people can get involved if you have concerns about people that might have a mental or behavioral health crisis or have something that you might be able to intervene with. And I'm not going to go through a whole training about becoming what we call a suicide prevention gatekeeper, but we can talk a little bit about that and give you just a couple of ideas. I'd like to invite you to ask questions at any point in time. We'll have this be, especially since we're a little bit smaller group, a little bit more conversational. And so feel free to chime in with comments or questions, and rather than try to wait and hold on to those till later. So if you're like me, I have to kind of ask it right away or it kind of floats off and then it's gone. So I want to be able to answer your questions if I can as they come up. I'll certainly take them, whether I can answer them or not. We'll wait to be seen. Again, as you said, I've been involved with suicide prevention since 2003. I was on the initial board of directors for SPAN Idaho, which was the Suicide Prevention Action Network of Idaho. It was a statewide group, and we had regional subgroups within the different health and welfare regions around the state of Idaho. So after I got off the board of the state group, I became more involved with Region 2 in our area, more specifically in the Lewiston area. And that kind of waxed and waned over the years as far as interest and involvement from volunteers and other folks. In 2019, SPAN Idaho went out of business as a state nonprofit. And so all of the local groups and regional groups had to make a decision about if they wanted to just kind of disband as well, or if they wanted to try to partner with some other organization in their community. I know some joined up with NAMI, the National Alliance for the Mental Illness, and other folks. And so we decided we wanted to go ahead and try to, in Lewiston area, form our own nonprofit. So we went through the whole articles of incorporation and all of the steps that you have to take to form a nonprofit. And we were granted our nonprofit 501c3 status in late 2019. So we're a relatively new group here as far as our own entity is concerned. We had kind of lofty goals. We said that, with our name, we couldn't use the SPAN name, so we had to come up with something different. So we kept it close, went from SPAN to SPIN, and as it turned out, we are now the Suicide Prevention of the Inland Northwest. That seems like a very large area, but our catchment area, our goal area to be having some level of influence in and support within are the 5 counties in District 2, so it's like Clearwater, Latah, Nez Perce, Lewis, and Idaho County. And then we also are involved with Asotin and Garfield County in southeastern Washington, and then Wallowa County in northeastern Oregon. And so that's kind of where we hope to have our sphere of influence as we expand and get a little bit more active. I first got involved with suicide prevention, as she mentioned. I was a social worker for the Lewiston School District for most of my paid career. And we sadly, as other school districts have, and I know Moscow has as well had students who die by suicide while they're in school. And I was their crisis team leader for our school district, and so I was very involved with students, with families, with staff after those incidents. And so I knew what a horrible impact that has on kids and families and survivors. And so that was kind of my impetus for getting more involved with suicide prevention. Our SPIN mission, we had a mission statement. It says, our mission is to reduce stigma surrounding suicide and mental health in our region through education and awareness events, and to reduce suicide deaths. We feel like if we could get that education out there, if we can help reduce stigma around mental illness and behavioral health issues that people have, that people will hopefully have access to better health and will seek help and be able to find hope to be able to survive and go on. So that's kind of what our mission is. We do things like, we're not a crisis organization of ourselves, so we certainly refer people to other people to handle crises, and we do have some supports. Again, I'll be talking about that. But we do things like attend health fairs, and we usually have a table at the or booth at the Nez Perce County Fair. We're going to maybe try to get to some other county fairs as we have time and availability. There's a activity called Fresh Check. It's right when kids come back to, or students come back to campus at LCSC. We have a table there. We've sponsored billboards around suicide prevention and the hotline. We've done radio advertising. We have an annual conference. It's usually held at Williams Conference Center at Lewis Clark State College in the spring. Right now we're tentatively looking at May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. So it's going to be dependent on if we can secure a speaker. So that's kind of our hang up right now. We may have to push it back to this fall, but we had them regularly prior to COVID. Then COVID kind of crashed us, crashed a lot of things. And we ended up doing a couple half-day Zoom conferences, and so that worked out. And so we're heading back to full live conference this year. So hopefully as that information becomes available, we'll let you folks know. You can get that information out up here as well. Usually targets mental health providers, but we also have had at times different tracks more for the public, around some public awareness and training and things. So as we get our schedule lined up, we'll let you know. Right now, again, with SPIN, we have 6 board members on our board. We're going to try to get it up to 12 now. And like I said, I received some grants from Twin County United Way. In fact, Twin County United Way is Stoughton and Nez Perce County is their area. They listed as their #1 priority suicide prevention. So we got a nice grant from them when we've been able to partner with them. Question?
Are your board members from around the region?
Not yet. We're pretty much from the LC Valley yet, but we're going to be reaching out to pull some other folks in. And right now we have our monthly meetings are the 4th Tuesday of every month from 6 to 7 p.m. or thereabouts. Usually drag on a little bit longer than that, but we do with them on Zoom as well as live. So we have them at LCSE in one of their conference rooms, and so we're able to offer it Zoom, and so we have people that check in from other areas. So as we get board members, we'll be able to add them in, and if they can't travel in for the meeting, we'll certainly have them come in and join us on Zoom, and then they can certainly help us in those outer areas. One of the events we had, and I'm just going to mention it briefly because the 3rd of 3 is tonight. So we did partner with Twin County United Way as well as with Idaho Public Health District 2 to buy the rights to a documentary called My Ascension. It's a documentary about an hour and a half. It's a young woman who at age 16, she lived in Ascension Parish in Louisiana. She made a suicide attempt when she was 16. She shot herself in the neck. Her mom heard the gunshot go off and came in and saw her, and anyway, a long story short, she survived and is still surviving. And however, the impact of the shot paralyzed her, and so she has suffered with paralysis since then. Anyway, beautiful young woman. She was model, a high school cheerleader, very good academically, upper middle class family, all of those things that we wouldn't normally associate with kids who might be suicidal. But what that tells us again is that suicide isn't, it has no boundaries as far as who it affects. And so she suffered a lot from her self-admission of depression and anxiety, but she never shared that with anyone, not even her family. That was all an internal burden she bore, and it finally became too much for her, and she made that suicide attempt. So the whole documentary focuses around her recovery, her goal to try to gain some movement back, and then her advocacy for suicide prevention, particularly among teens. And it's a really great, well-done documentary. So we showed it 2 weeks ago, Wednesday at Lewiston High School. We showed it last week at Clarkston High School. We're showing it tonight at Clearwater River Casino from 6:30 to 8:30. And then after that, we'll have the rights, and so we're going to try to get it out into some other areas as we can. So, we'll be looking in some of our outer regions to bring that around and have that involved. We also do, as part of that, after the documentary, we do a 30-minute panel, and we have some panelists with different backgrounds, and then we have a moderator. It's actually the president of the Twin County United Way Board, really nice guy. Anyway, he just asks questions and follows up, just again, how people can get more involved and how they can be supportive and stuff within their communities. So we'll keep you aware of that as things come up with that. Any more questions about that at this point? Any questions about anything at this point? Yes?
Right, I just had a question. You mentioned, Steve, you talked about fresh check when
Mhm.
new students
All
come
right.
back. And I'm wondering if that is exclusive to LCSC, or is it something that you can share?
Well, we just are asked to do a table. That's something that's sponsored by LCSC student, the Student Counseling Center actually puts that on. So I don't know if U of I or anybody else does something similar to that here on the U of I campus, but if so, we'd be happy to come up and have a table something like that. So yeah, it's not something we sponsor, it's just something we show up and do, so
Okay.
get that information out. It's a lot of different tables and a lot of different things about student support that they have at the college through the counseling center and other areas that people table. Actually, they do it outside. They've been able to do it outside. Kids come up and wander through and get a lot of good information. So yeah, if you have questions, or they do up at the U of I, I'm sure Doug Steele, who actually is our spin board of directors, is the director of the counseling center at LCSC, and so he'd be happy to help out with that. Yes?
Is there some, excuse me.
No worries.
Is there a cost for watching that at the casino?
No. Tonight, all of our showings are free of charge to the community, and they're open. We really encourage people to come, bring kids, bring families. I think anybody from like age 10 on up, or even maybe a little bit younger, would benefit from watching that. So yeah, there's no charge to come and watch that. Like I say, we got some support from Twin County and United Way, as well as from Public Health Board, to buy the rights to be able to show that. So anyway, just a little bit around kind of background about suicide and how it's impacting our area. According to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, there are 20 young people who die by suicide every day in the United States. And research shows that for every suicide death, whether it's a child or an adult, there are about 115 people who are directly impacted one way or another by that suicide death. I usually start out, and I neglected to start out my presentation this morning by saying that when I speak about suicide, for one, it's not the most uplifting topic. And secondly, I don't know what anybody's background is personally or professionally or anything else regarding suicide. And so, just statistically, there are other people besides me in the room or who will be watching this that have had suicide impact their lives one way or another, whether it's they've been suicidal, or whether they made an attempt, or whether they've had a family member who's made an attempt or been suicidal, or who's actually died by suicide, or maybe it's a colleague or close friend. And so, I try to be understanding and empathetic to whatever you bring here regarding your background or experience with suicide. So I always offer to stay late afterwards and talk with people individually, or you'll have my contact information. And I'm willing to talk with people or help support anybody at any time if I can as well. So in the United States in 2020, and suicide data, like other data, tends to take a while to catch up. So we don't, 2020 is about the most recent we have of some of that data. But anyway, the age-adjusted suicide rate in 2020 was 13.48, so about 13 and a half people per 100,000. We measure suicide rate in number of deaths per 100,000 people in a population. That way we can compare small rural areas like ours with large areas like Seattle, New York, California, and those places too. So it's all adjusted by 100,000 people. Oops, sorry. Almost kicked the bucket, it's just my water bottle. The rate of suicide is highest in middle-aged white men. I'm just kind of past that demographic now, so I was there when I first started, but I'm on the other end of that one now. In 2020, males died by suicide at 3.88 times more than women, so almost 4-to-1 ratio of men to women die by suicide, although women make a suicide attempt at almost a 2-to-1 ratio. So we have 2-to-1 women making attempts and a 4-to-1 ratio of men dying by suicide. People know why that is?
Firearms? Choice of.
Method, yeah. That's the method, or we call it the means by which they choose to die or have their suicide attempt. And it has everything to do with means. The top 2 means for males, although women die by them as well, are, I think you mentioned the number 1, which is firearm. Secondly would be, what do you think for males?
Alcohol.
Nope.
Pills?
Nope, good guess. Would be hanging or suffocation, okay? And so the top 2 for women would be pills or poisoning of some kind, and the second would be
Knife?
cutting, yeah. So, and when you look at immediate lethality of death with suicide, shooting yourself or hanging yourself is much more immediately lethal than pills or poisoning or cutting overall, unless I guess you get your jugular vein or something, but most people don't cut there. So what that tells us is that a lot of people, whether it's men or women, who use pills or poisoning or cutting, they either change their mind and get help themselves once they've done that, or somebody finds them before they die and get them to emergency services for help. And so, you know, that's kind of where that plays itself out. Remember, we mentioned the ratio, or the 13.5 per 100,000 people. That averages out to, in our country, about 130 suicides per day, and just over about 1 every 11 minutes, 24/7, 365, somebody that dies of suicide. Yes?
Yeah, you said that in the cases where they are able to help someone who's made an attempt, how much, I don't know, you probably don't call it recidivism, but how much repeat?
Right, so so I would say, and they talk about this in the film actually, because she said, the first thing I saw laying there on the floor was I felt the blood going out the back of my neck. I was, oh my God, what happened? What did I do? I want to live, I want to live. That was the girl's thoughts. Before she kind of blacked out and they came and got her. But she talks with another person in the film that said, that's a woman, it's actually kind of a counselor that now is helping people. And that woman said, oh, that wasn't my experience with my attempt. I thought, oh geez, how come I didn't die? And she was mad that she lived. And so you do have a number of people who make multiple suicide attempts. A lot of it, there's so many factors that it depends on. It depends on your mental health, it depends on if you use substances, it depends on a whole lot of other things about whether you will be a repeat person. It does put you, obviously, in a much higher, there's different risk categories, put you in a much higher risk category if you've made a previous suicide attempt. But there are people who make, multiple suicide attempts. A lot of people would maybe say borderline personality disorder, schizophrenia, other kinds of things that make multiple attempts that don't end up dying. Cutting behavior, you might know, typically is not associated with suicidal behavior. People mostly cut, and women cut more than men, more as a result of depression and other mood disorders, as a way of having feeling that they've numbed and things like that. So, people say, well, they've cut themselves, that's a suicide attempt. It depends on their intent, really. And they'll say, no, I'm not suicidal, I've never been suicidal, but it helps me relieve my anxiety, my depression, my whatever. So, Any more questions about that? I don't know if that answers your question. I don't know if we have a percentage of people who make attempts that actually don't. But I mean, there's a really good documentary too about a guy that forgotten his name right off the top of my head, jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived. And he now is going around the world telling everybody, as he was going down, I want to live. And he didn't have a do-over, right? You don't just, you're not on a bungee cord coming back up. So yeah. Did you have a question, ma'am? Oh, okay. I thought. Go
This
ahead.
doesn't have, relate to that, but
Sure.
I'm just curious about, in the school system.
Right.
Are there statistics showing how many suicides are the result of bullying?
Not.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah, bullying is a huge problem, and it certainly is a risk factor for kids who are bullied. And we do see a number of kids who, whether it's bullying in school or certainly social media is another one. Kids get bullied horribly on social media. And so, I have a really love-hate relationship with social media for that particular reason. Because some kids, that's their only contact with other people is through social media. They're really isolated, and that's, isolation is certainly another risk factor, and all of those kind of things, relationships, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think there's data about that, but certainly it is a risk factor. So I want to just talk about it a little bit. I had some other data I wanted to share with you. If you ever want to get a whole bunch of good information about suicide and suicide prevention, you can go to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSP, again, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. They have a really, really great website with all kinds of data and information. They have all kinds of stuff by state. So in 2020 in Idaho, let's see, let me get back to Idaho. That's the US data. No wonder I couldn't find Idaho. So in Idaho, it's the ninth leading cause of death is suicide across all age ranges. It's the second leading cause of death in the ages of 10 to 34 to 44, behind accidents, or most of which are car crashes. So in that age range, that from younger people, second leading cause of death. Fourth leading cause of death in that 45 to 54 age range, and then it goes down a little bit as you get older. Although we do have a lot of elderly white males that die by suicide. That's a pretty high risk group once you hit that age range. 2020, nationally again, we had almost 46,000 people die by suicide. In Idaho, it was 419. Remember the national rate is 13.48. The Idaho rate was 23.23, so we're close to well over 1.5 times the national rate, pushing up closer to twice the national rate. We've been consistently that for years and years since I've been involved. We've been the 3rd to the 8th highest state ranking in suicide since I've been involved. Right now, last I heard, we were 6th or 7th, which again is better than 3rd, but not anywhere near 49th or 50th. Rural states tend to be much higher than urban states. So Intermountain West states all have the highest rate of suicide, other with the outlier being Alaska, which often has the highest rate. Because with one of the demographics are ethnically, American Indians or Natives have the highest suicide rate of any ethnic group, followed by whites. Lowest is African Americans, although the rates are rising too. So, in the Intermountain West states, Alaska, there's a lot more per capita American Native folks. So we see that happening. Talk a little bit about mental health. Idaho has been anywhere from 51st when you include Washington, D.C. to 49th or 48th with state per capita funding for mental health resources. So we've been at the very bottom or right at the bottom for per capita mental health spending designated by the state. So it devolves upon individuals and families, and if you're on Medicaid, that helps. Or if you have private insurance, that helps. We have a huge gap in the middle for mental health resources. And so, that's certainly an area we need to be able to provide a lot more for people. And I don't know about Moscow, I think it's probably the same as Lewiston. We have 2, 3, 4 month waiting lists for people to get in to see counselors, even if you have resources. And so when you're having a mental health crisis or behavioral health crisis, waiting 2 or 3, 4 months is not a good option for you. It's horrible. It's almost criminal in my book. I don't want to get on too many bandwagons or up on too many soapboxes, but just, you know, and I have friends that are in the counseling business and private counseling, and they say they can't even find enough people to hire to come in and help. Fortunately, we're able to offer now for some people telehealth, you know, telemental health, so they get counselors online, and so that's providing a little bit more of a release for some people, but again, other people don't want to check that out. So, so nationally, we talk about firearms, and again, I don't do anything around. It's a political hotspot for a lot of people, and so, but I just want to point out the data. Nationally, we have about 52% of people who die by suicide using a firearm. In Idaho, it's about 62%, so about 10% higher rate just by firearms in Idaho. In Idaho, in 2020, 86% of firearm deaths, and so including homicide, suicide, or accidental, 86% of firearm deaths were suicides. And 66% at that point were, of all suicides were by firearms in 2020. So again, you know, suicide prevention folks in most states, and certainly in Idaho, we don't do anything around gun control or anything else like that, but what we do talk about a lot is safe storage for firearms. So we really want to push safe storage. And whether that's gun safes or other things, we've done that within our own spin group. We've auctioned off gun safes and done gun raffles, safe raffles and other things, and we really talk about safe storage. And you know, when I worked in the school district, it was, you know, I know you have a gun safe, and that's great. And if you have a child or somebody in your house that's suicidal, I want the guns out of the house. I can't tell you how many kids told me that they knew this combination to the gun safe. Parents didn't think they knew the combination to the gun safe, or they knew where the key was, or whatever. And so I want them out of the house. You can give them to your neighbor, you can give them to your family members, you can give them to your friends. While somebody is suicidal, I don't want them in the house. And so that's been kind of a hard sell too for people, because they want to have them right there with them, or by their bedside, or you know, wherever they have them. But there is data, and I don't have it exactly to show that, you know, not having immediate access to lethal means saves lives. So if somebody is going to shoot themselves, and it takes them even 30 minutes to an hour, hour and a half to find a gun, that can save their life. That can be all the time it takes for them to change their mind and have that suicidal crisis that we call that peak, where they're going to do it, kind of dissipate and go down. So we want to have separation from the means, and that means maybe, you know, locking up pills, getting rid of the knives, doing those other kind of things. We can't get you away from every possible method or means in your house that you could use, but if it's going to take time to set it together, put it up, do that kind of things, that extra little bit of time is going to save lives. So any questions about that? Comments? Okay, I need to get to the 988 stuff. As was mentioned, the 988 hotline, it's a national crisis and suicide hotline, was implemented on July 20th of 2022. It was a result of public law number 116-172. It was fully enacted and passed on October 17th, 2020. It's called the National Suicide Hotline Designation Act of 2020. Anyway, so they had, every state had from then, October 2020 till July of 2022, to put a plan in place about how they were going to staff and have people to operate those hotlines. Different states did it different ways. There was money initially allocated through mental health agencies and other kind of folks to help do that and get those things in place, because some states were better prepared than others, or had other systems better in place than others. It had gone up, well, so the Biden administration said increased federal investments 18-fold from 24 million to 432 million just for that priority. So there's also in 2022 budget requests for additional funding for the Lifeline, for existing federal crisis funding resources. And so again, that all had to get played out within the state, each state. And in Idaho, we had a state hotline, a suicide hotline that was run out of Boise with volunteers, but it was a state hotline, had an 800 number. And what Idaho decided to do was to have the Idaho State Suicide Hotline kind of take that over and operate that. But they knew they were going to have to expand their numbers, their volunteers, their staff, because they were expecting a huge increase in calls once this became available for a couple of reasons. And just like the hotline did before, it's a 24/7, 365 call line, but it's also a text line, and there's also a, you can go online and there's a kind of a blog or you can chat, a chat line basically, that you can chat with people as well. They know that kids in particular, young people, don't call as much. They use text almost for all other communications now, so they want to make sure they had a text line available and had enough people out to operate that. And they've expanded their focus, which I think is great. So it's called the Crisis and Suicide Hotline for a reason. Again, it was mostly all suicide hotlines before, but the new Crisis and Suicide Hotline is for anybody experiencing a behavioral health crisis of any kind can call in or text in. So substance use issues, mental health issues, depression, anxiety, whatever it could be. If you just have concerns about yourself, but they're also really pushing if you have concerns about a family member, a friend, somebody else, a colleague, call and get information, call and get some resources, call and talk to somebody about how you can then support the person you care about. So it's really expanded its mission, I guess, to be able to not just be a suicide hotline, but to really incorporate the whole mental health and behavioral health focus, which I think is great. I'm waiting for the data from the hotline in Boise to get us the numbers, but they've said they're over doubled their numbers, and they're just keep getting more and more and more folks calling in. Yes.
I'm just wondering how the 988 system dovetails with the telehealth. Do they work together?
They would maybe utilize, they would give that telehealth numbers, if they have some numbers of people that take telehealth clients, they would give that as a resource to people that would call in. I don't think they can immediately hook somebody into that. So each state has a list that they try to keep as updated as possible about different resources that they have, and they'll ask you which town you're calling from, and so by county they're supposed to have lists of resources within each county that they can resource people to. I can't imagine what a nightmare it is keeping that updated, because as we know, those things change before you get them published, and so keeping those updated is going to be a challenge for the hotlines, whichever state you're in, and it's always been an issue for us. So it's going to depend on public health and local folks to keep those resources current and get that information to the hotline down in Boise. And there's all kinds of contact information about that. But so kind of the whole purpose behind getting the 988 number going is the national hotline used to be 1-800-273-TALK 5277, but it's took me a while to memorize that number, and I guess most people didn't have that number memorized. And so you're looking on, where's that? By the time you find it, it could be too late. And so we're hoping that 988 over time will become as common for people to remember as 911, because as you remember, I don't know whatever decade it was, we got the 911 up and running nationally. But little kids know the 911 number and call it, and so we're hoping everybody will become as familiar with 988. What I'm going to ask you to do right now is we're just going to take about a minute to take out your phone if you don't have it out already. If you have one with you today, go into your contact list, add contacts, and put in, you can name it whatever you want, crisis line, hotline, suicide line, whatever you want to name it in your contact list, but put in 988. Because again, as we're getting to be familiar with it, I don't want you to be thinking, was it 988, 998, what was it, whatever. So 977, 699, whatever. So that's probably what I would be doing. So every time I do one of these things, I have everybody put it in their phones. So, so make sure you have that number 988 in your list, so you can get it, you can utilize it, or you can let other people know about it. See what else. So again, formerly it was the Idaho Suicide Prevention Hotline, and now it's called the Idaho Crisis and Suicide Hotline. Again, it responds 24/7 to chats, calls, texts from anybody who needs support. So I have called it. I called it just, and I upfront said I wasn't having a crisis, but I wanted to call it a time. I hope they weren't too busy. And I talked to a young woman who's one of the crisis line staff people that took numbers or took calls from people. And it took me about 40 seconds because I timed it to get through. There's a couple prompts you get when you first call it. They want to make sure they're getting you to the right thing. So there's one if you're a veteran, you can do this, or if you're this, I think the ones that send you off if you're calling about LGBTQ population or different things. So they want to have different resources to help different callers and different people that call in. So once you get in, and it doesn't take that long for me to get. I mean, I get into much worse things if I could try to call my bank. So it's a little easier to get through to this than it was to my bank usually, or other things that I try to call. Anyway, they'll answer the phone. They listen to what your concerns are. They'll say, are you immediately crisis? They'll try to assess the level of crisis, whether it's for you, yourself, a friend, or who you're calling about. They'll understand. They will try to figure out how whatever you're calling in about is affecting you at that point in time. They provide support back and forth, whether it's just talking with somebody. Often, most of their calls are pretty resolved just by talking with somebody, especially if it's somebody that's in crisis, and talking them through and getting them to kind of settle down and kind of talking with them about who they can contact and what they can do to keep themselves safe, and they'll try to get all that information. They also, let me step back. So when you call it, when you call 988, because they don't have all of our phones pinged to where we are locally, it'll go to whatever your area code is for your phone. So if you are a 208 area code phone number on your own personal cell phone or a home landline, it'll go right to the Idaho line. If you have a different area code, it'll go to that state's. We'll pick it up initially, but they will immediately transfer you to your state. They can just put you on hold and transfer you right over to your state. So I know a lot of people that move into Lewiston anyway that have different area codes than 208 on their cell phone because they've kept a line that they moved in from another state. So it'll go to that other state for now. I don't know if they'll ever be able to remedy that or not. But anyway, they do just pop you right over to whichever state you're residing in or calling about. Yes?
So what was the rationale for doing that, given that so many people have area codes?
Well, it was just too much of a technological way, and people don't want to have, and I don't know that there even is a way. You might have some people that believe that the government can track you where you are 24/7, 365 by your cell phone, but they can't ping you from where they don't have a tracking system to tell you where you are physically. They can only go off your area code when you call that number. So whether they'll ever be able to change that, I don't know. I anticipate they might not, just because of privacy issues with people, but that's the only answer I have. That's the only answer I've been given to this point anyway, about why they can't ping you or target you in your state.
Yeah,
Your
just to follow up, my
location.
reason for asking that was if somebody calls an Idaho crisis line, I wonder why Idaho just doesn't say clearly they need help from somebody here in
Right.
Idaho.
So they can certainly talk with somebody from another line. Yeah, they don't just you're from somewhere else. Sorry, I can't help you. They'll talk with whoever. But if they want resources from another state, they don't want to just talk or get that verbal support or that text support. Then they'll say, okay, well, you're from Dubuque, Iowa. Well, let me get you in touch with somebody there that can give you some local resources and some local people to call, or places you can go and access that. Does that make better sense?
Oh,
Is that a little more clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, yeah.
I have one more question
Mm-hmm.
then. Does the 988 hotline document how many people call in to say, I can't get in to see my counselor for 4 weeks and I'm in a crisis because of that? I mean, they're trying to seek an earlier appointment. Is that something that comes up?
I don't know. I don't know if they keep that. I'll have to ask that question next time I call them, or I can probably call their business office. I don't have to call the online workers, but that's a good thing to find out if they can do that. I don't know if they're keeping that data. I would guess that there are a number of people who are calling that number because they can't get in to see somebody. And I'm certainly telling people, hey, if you're having a crisis and you can't get a hold of somebody here in town, this number is always there for you. It's there 24/7, 365. And so I would anticipate that if we ever have easier access for people either monetarily or just availability to mental health in their local region, that maybe those numbers would go down to the crisis hotline. But for now, I think it's a pretty important thing for folks. Other questions about the hotline or how it operates, or what would happen when you call that number? You know, and again, if you have questions, like I said, I just called one day and said, hey, I'm Steve Button, this is who I am, and you know, I happen to be involved with suicide prevention in Lewiston and surrounding areas, and I just have a couple questions. Do you have some time that I can answer? Because I don't want to take time on your phone if you need to be, you know, responding to a real crisis. And she said yes, and so I only took about 5 minutes of her time and asked some questions. But she also gave me the number of they have like a business office that you can call as well. And so anyway, that's how that plays itself out. Any other questions about the hotline? I have a lot of stuff about the hotline I'm going to share with you as you leave, and I will leave you guys some more if you want to have for other people that might watch it later. You can take extras. Yes, do you have a comment? Question? I have a couple other things I want to talk about. So just again, I have a couple of handouts. One of them is just says what leads to suicide, and this is actually right off the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, the website I mentioned earlier is their website, and I've listed the source down on the bottom of there. It just has again kind of the causes, the things that happen, the risk factors we call them, that might lead up to people feeling like there's no way out, that suicide might be the only option for them. Again, risk factors are characteristics or conditions that increase the chance that somebody might try to die by suicide. There's a whole long list of those. I'm not going to take time to go through that, but I will say that 90% of people who die by suicide, not who make an attempt or who have suicide ideation, who actually die by suicide, either have or could have been diagnosed with a mental illness at the time of their death. And so mental illness and not treating mental illness is a huge risk factor, and 90% of people who die have an active mental illness at the time of their death, some of which have been diagnosed and some of which haven't. Like this girl's, if she had died, nobody would have known that she would have been out of the blue. And you know, I've had other family members that have had a person in their life who died by suicide. It seems to be particularly common with younger people, young adults and teens, who say, you know, it came out of the blue, they had no idea. But I think that's because people keep stuff inside. And again, because of the stigma attached with it and all of those kind of things, people don't share when they're struggling. And so we really need to make some positive differences in that respect. There's also some protective factors on there, things that, number one, access to mental health care and being proactive about mental health. That's their first number one proactive or protective factor. Feeling connected to family and community supports, those kind of things. Limiting access to lethal means, we talked about that. Goes on to talk about some of the behaviors and some of the things that people might be talking about. Killing themselves, feeling hopeless, having no reason to live, being a burden to others, feeling trapped, unbearable pain, behaviors that are associated with it as well. Some of those things are very common with people that have mental health disorders as well as people who are suicidal. So take a look at some of those things and be aware of that yourselves or other people. Certainly the more risk factors we have, the higher the risk for somebody to make a suicide attempt would be. If you look through that, most all of us have, would fit into some of those categories at one time or another. And the good news is that about 90% of people who have a mental illness or are struggling don't die by suicide. So people either work through it on their own somehow and kind of get through whatever that bump along the road was in their life, or bumps along that might be over time, or they are able to get into the counseling or maybe visit a doctor and find that medication treatment might help them, and so or a combination thereof. So they get through those tough times. And so, but unfortunately, as we know, a large number don't. So I have that. I also have, and I'll just leave these over here. This is from another presentation I did, and it doesn't particular to this group, but it's just, I did a whole presentation with a church group down in Lewiston about teen suicide and stuff. There's some information about what parents need to know about teen suicide because it's a little different from adults for sure. So I'll leave that information over there as well. Yep. One more thing real quickly. I know I'm running out of time. I tend to do that. Just 5 quick action steps for helping somebody in emotional pain. We'll hand that out and I'll leave you some of those as well. The first is if you have concerns about somebody, just ask. And sometimes getting to that ask is really difficult for people, especially if they're people who you're really close to. We find that it's hardest to ask people if they're thinking about suicide, if they're family members, if they're friends, if that kind of thing, but it's going to end up being those kind of folks that have those concerns. So just, are you thinking about killing yourself? That's a pretty easy question to ask, but it's really hard. Again, like I said, especially if you have a close relationship, because we're afraid of the answer. If people say yes, then that puts us into a whole nother realm in our world. Then the next thing is to just kind of keep them safe. Again, reducing the access to lethal means. Ask them if they have a plan. Removing or disabling the lethal means can make a difference. Third is just to be there and listen. Listen carefully, learn what they're talking about, thinking and feeling. One of the things we don't want to do is say, oh, you have every reason to live, there's no reason, you're just a wonderful person. People who are suicidal don't believe that. They're in pain and they know that you're not willing to listen if you just kind of use platitudes like that. And so just listen to them, say, yeah, you're going through some really tough times, I understand that. And while I can't be in your shoes, I sure care about you and I want you to know that I'm willing to be here. And then help them connect. Again, it gives the 988 number. Maybe also help them make an appointment and go with them to an appointment to see somebody. I don't say just give them some numbers to call and hope that does that, because most severely depressed people won't have the energy to do that, to follow through on making those appointments and getting to the appointment on their own. So either you go with them or find somebody that will go with them, at least to that first appointment. And then last, stay connected. Once you find out that somebody shares that kind of intimate information with you, it's important for you to be able to stay connected with them and follow up with them. Say, hey, can I call you tomorrow and see how things are going? Or can I check in with you from time to time? And whether it's texts or calls or dropping by, those are some really easy, I don't want to say easy, but relatively, are steps that everybody can do. It's something that we can all do to help folks. I keep telling people, don't hesitate to get involved with people, or don't hesitate to ask. I'd rather have somebody look at me like I'm this, 3-eyed, horned monster for asking them, are they thinking about killing themselves, and when they have no thoughts about that. What are you talking about? No way, I don't have those thoughts. I'd rather have that kind of reaction than, I don't know if I should ask them or not, and then later on wishing I had when there's a problem. So, and I've asked people that before based on a lot of information I have, and I think they were very honest with me about not being suicidal, and I think that's great. And most people are pretty happy that you at least asked and cared enough to be involved. So I'll have any questions about the 5 steps. You mentioned you'd taken the QPR training, the question, persuade, refer, gatekeeper training. That's one of the things I do as well. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on the audience. Gatekeeper training that goes into some more in-depth steps about how to ask the question and how to, the P is persuade somebody to stay alive for now until they get to the resources that you have or a referral that you would make, and getting them that help. So something like these 5 steps, but it's a little more involved. And so, I do that. We have a couple, 3 of us that are now trained as gatekeeper trainers in SPIN, and so we'd be happy to come up. I've done it for as few as 1 or 2 people. I've done it for audiences quite large. I prefer 25 to 40 as the most people that I would do a QPR presentation for, but I've done it for more. So questions at this point? Yes.
Could you just explain why QPR training is important for members of the general public who may not be
Right.
behavioral health professionals?
Right. So I tell people, I need you out there in the community. I need everybody with eyes and ears on people out in the community to recognize when people might be having problems or might be having concerns around suicide. I need you to be able to recognize that. I need you to be able to have enough of a relationship with somebody to be able to ask that question and hopefully have a connection with them enough to be able to get some honest feedback going back and forth. You need to be able to take those initial steps to help them keep safe and to find some hope, because most people who get to that point of enacting a plan for suicide. They don't want to die, they just want their pain to go away. And they feel like suicide is the only way to finally do that. So we're trying to find them some other ways to believe there's some other hope in other areas. So finding hope and then getting that referral made. I say, I can't be out there looking around and knowing all the people that are concerned. I need you all as gatekeepers out in our community to be aware and get them to people like me and people like us that can then do that long-term intervention with people and get them those supports that they need, whether through the medical community or through the counseling and therapy community or whatever. So does that answer your question?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's we can't do it all, those of us in the mental health community, so we do need everybody involved. And I've done QPRs as young as 10, 11-year-olds all the way on up. So we do it every year in Lewiston School District in all of our health classes, and all of our staff get trained every year. And so it's just kind of something we do, and it's an important thing, and so we want to keep that going. I do have I'll give you options for a safety plan. I don't know if you've heard about that. So safety plans are really great, and they're utilizing this now pretty much everywhere around the country. They used to use no self-harm, no suicide contracts with people. What they found was that if those actually increased suicide rates rather than decrease them. So they used to say, I promise not to kill myself until da 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 da. That's a no suicide contract. Sometimes they were written, sometimes they were verbal. Safety plans are better. These are things about, and what it talks about is, and they'll write it down. They write it down, how I know when I'm struggling, things I can do to take my mind off my problems, people and places that distract me, family and friends I can call for help, professionals I can contact, including if the ideas above don't help me, there's the crisis hotline number, or go to the emergency room or call 911. How to keep safe in my environment, so things I need to do to reduce means and stay safe. And then on the other side, on the flip side, there are reasons for living. That's that kind of hopeful piece we have with people that we want to get involved. So what I have people do is fill this out. And then what I have them do is take pictures of it and put it in their phone. Because chances are it's going to end up not with them when they're having a crisis. And so, it's something that can be redone and done and changed. And I know that I've actually was with a teen that was suicidal at the St. Joe's emergency room, and the emergency room doctor flipped one of these out and was going through that with the kid right there in the ER. So I know they utilize these, and I know they're important, and counselors and therapists use these all the time as well. Yes?
Do you have a folder of all of your handouts that we'd be able to access electronically someplace? So that we can share them more widely with those who are not here in person today.
I don't have a lot of those electronically. I might have some of them. I can see what I have and let you know. I'll get back to your Kathy about that. I think I might have the safety plan electronically. One of the things I'm concerned about a little bit is handing a lot of things out without an explanation. And so I need to be a little bit careful about that, because I want to be sure people are utilizing them the right way and those kind of things. So the 98 number, I can get out there anytime for anybody. I'm giving that out left, right, and front and backwards. But maybe like the safety plan and some of these other things, I want to kind of give a little bit of explanation to people about those kind of things as well. Some of these other handouts and things I can certainly send electronically as well. So, like I said, if you go on the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, there's the American Association of Suicidology. There's a lot of different things. If you Google suicide prevention, that you can get tons of resources. So these were just a few of them. I do want to share with you also, and I'll leave some flyers here. Just within the last few months, we actually got a support group going for survivors of suicide loss, so family members or close friends of people who have had somebody who's died by suicide. We have a group that meets now once a month. They meet on the third Wednesday of each month from 5:30 to 7 o'clock in the evening down in Lewiston. It's at the Idaho Department of Labor building. The co-facilitators are a woman named Chris Saldana, and there's Dan and Amber Maurer, who are a couple. Both Dan and Amber and Chris have had family members who've died by suicide, so they have been through that as well. And so they're kind of the co-facilitators of the support group for folks. And so it's, again, free of charge. I'll leave information about that. You can drop into that, or you can call Chris ahead of time and ask questions, or they also have an email address you can ask questions about. So I'll leave that as well. I do have the business card for SPIN. That doesn't have my number on it. I can give you my number. And again, then you can get a hold of me through the SPIN number. Faith Dickinson, who's our chairperson, has our phone, but My number is 208-305-9633, and I'm the only one that answers my messages or gets my voicemail and text. So if you have something you want to get a hold of me in particular about, that's a good way to get a hold of me. There's our suicide prevention email address on there as well, and our SPIN number has the 988 information on the back. 988 has its own little business card, so I got some of those over there as well. Let me see what else I got for you. I have some, if you want, we had 50,000 labels printed up with the 988 hotline on it. They're 30 per sheet. If you want to take a sheet of these and put them anywhere you want to around the community, we'll encourage you to do that. In offices, I have people that were going around to public restrooms and putting them on all of the hand washing facilities at the public restrooms, and so we'll leave some of those if you want. If you need more, I can get those to you. I have some little magnets that have the number on it that will just slip on the side of any kind of magnetized place you have, and I have a whole bunch of bookmarks. We printed up, I don't know how many thousand different bookmarks, but they have the old crisis hotline number. That still works if you call the old 10-digit number, but they've asked us to either throw away or get rid of all of our stuff that has the old number on it. And so, anyway, I'll leave these. You can take as many as you want, and we'll go with that. Any final questions, comments? I know I ran over time a little bit, I apologize, but we got started a little bit late though, so. Yes?
Do you have any idea about how widely this information is in Muscle School District?
As far as the 988 stuff or QPR stuff?
The prevention, yeah.
So, not this year, but in years past, I've actually given out stickers that had the old hotline number on it. That they actually put on students' ID cards, student ID cards. What we're going to be doing in the Valley, Lewiston and Clarkson, and hopefully Stoughton, and I'm spreading the word out, is for next fall, talking with the companies that do the student ID cards. They're going to have that imprinted right on part of the card. So it doesn't have to be a sticker or anything else, it's just going to be right in there.
Well, that'd be great.
So have that number, that 988 number, crisis hotline number, right on their student ID cards. So most kids, I understand, don't keep their student ID card with them. They take a picture of it on their phone and they use it that way. News to me. That wasn't an option when I was going through school. So, other questions? So we're hoping to have all of our regional folks involved with that process. And then, like I said, we tried to get QPR going in some of the other outlying school districts and have had little less success with some of that. I did do it with all the cul-de-sac, all of the Lapway, all of the, where else have I been? Up on the prairie, somewhere, I forget, one of the school districts up there, and did all of their high school kids. I did the QPR for them, so, yeah.
I'm just kind of curious, are there many churches that have gotten involved in any way or taking that?
Not yet, I'm hoping so. I had the first one, New Bridges Church in Lewiston, had me come and do a whole presentation on suicide prevention and actually in children's grief as well. We've got a lot of young kids dying in our valley here over the last number of months, either by suicide or car crash or other things, and so we have a lot of grieving folks. And so I did a presentation that was kind of combined on, working with kids who are grieving as well as suicide prevention. So again, we'd be happy to, with whatever our capacity is, come and speak with any group, whether it's a church group, a business group, whatever faith denomination there may be, and get a hold of me, and we can try to get something worked out in the midst of everything else that we've got going on, and hopefully we'll get more people trained in some of these things to be able to have that capacity.
Excellent.
Thank you for your time and attention. I've run over my time, and I will pass it back. Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Steve. All right, stay tuned. March 1st, we